Hi there, I'm John Michael Garapi and this is Popcorn Roulette. Each episode I invite a guest to come on the show, they suggest a movie, we watch the movie, we get together and we talk about it. Today I have with me Tom Lacallaide. Tom, you're my first repeat customer.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Why'd you come back?
I just had a fun time. It's a great place to be.
Excellent. We have with us ourselves, you're here at a moment's notice because someone else had to cancel, unfortunately, so I didn't get a chance to get what snack you wanted from me, but I brought some gummy colas with me to match your match the bottle caps we got last time. You were not expected to eat all of those. You'll
I don't think I
get
will.
through them all.
These are excellent.
Yeah, you could tell, smell them as soon as you open up the package. They were kind of spicy.
Very gummy.
Yeah, almost got like a watered down cola flavor to them. You ever had cola that was mostly ice when you left it in the car and then you picked it up again and you drank it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's these exactly.
That's actually, when they were sitting in the boardroom making these.
That's what they were going for, you know. Nobody else actually does the watered down cola effect like we do.
That's what they totally planned that out.
That's their big concept. We're talking about The Birds with Alfred Hitchcock directing it, starring Rod Taylor and Tippi Hedren. Why did you choose The Birds, Tom?
Well, I'm a big fan of suspense movies and definitely old movies as well. And this is one that's just really sat with me for a long time. It's absolutely adorable.
When's the first time you saw The Birds?
When I was young with my grandmother. Yeah, she really liked those types of films and used to watch things like The Birds and Twilight Zone, thing like that together. So
cool, cool. Why don't you walk us through the plot? The Birds has 3 acts, as far as I'm concerned. They're pretty obvious. So what are those 3 acts?
Well, the movie starts off with a chance encounter between the 2 main characters in a bird shop. Going to the bird shop to pick up some birds, and this person, Mitch, comes in, and he recognizes her. She's almost somewhat of a celebrity of the times, often in the paper.
Specifically for getting naked in a fountain off in Rome, I believe.
Doing those types of things, exactly.
Right.
So he recognizes her, and he tries to play a gag on her because he doesn't really approve of that kind of behavior. So it kind of slowly turns into almost an infatuation that she has with him. She wants to figure out who he is and actually goes and tries to track him down.
Almost like there's a frenemies sort of aspect to this, like we're trying to one-up each other. Specifically, Hitchcock was aiming for, and I can't remember the name of the writer off the top of my head, unfortunately, but the writer was the one who suggested making this a screwball comedy, romantic comedy up front, and then interrupting it or having another the suspense thing attach on top of it.
That's exactly how it plays out.
So she brings lovebirds out to Mitch's house, and we change from Act 1 to Act 2. You have a specific point where you actually think that might actually be the case?
I'm not sure.
I do.
Tell me then.
She's in the boat coming back. Mitch is going to swing back around to see her. A seagull comes, hits her on the head, and that's where we begin.
Yeah, that is actually, you're right, that's a big turning point where she went and she tries to drop off the lovebirds. As she's coming back, she seems really happy to see Mitch. Mitch had raced around the water in the car to meet her. He had this big smile on, and then that gull just smashes her in the head.
So we end up having a bunch of, after this point, there is still more screwball comedy going on. I shouldn't use the word comedy, still more screwball romantic.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like this really awkward romance.
Right, but as we're doing this, the level of birds and what they're doing and how dangerous they're getting is increasing to almost paranormal levels.
Exactly. Odd things with the birds are happening, but it doesn't seem overly frightening. It's just, what's going on with that?
Yeah. So, quick question, while we're here in the middle of talking about the center of the birds, what is going on with that? Why? Why? Just why?
I think that's the point of the movie, is that you don't know why.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be surprising. It's supposed to be odd and just bizarre.
Mostly because we're in suspense. We aren't in any other genre. Hitchcock just doesn't tell us. he never gives us an indication.
No.
Do you have any guesses yourself, or is it even worth a guess?
I think that it's probably better to not try to make that
Metachlorians?
jump. Exactly, metachlorians. You know, just expect that something. You know, the birds have just gone crazy. I don't think that. I mean, throughout the movie, all the townspeople are trying to explain it. You know, was it the fog, or they got lost, or they attracted to lights, or I don't know, whatever other BS things they came up with. But I think that they just went crazy.
Yeah, and getting towards the end of the movie, which, first of all, spoilers. If you weren't expecting spoilers, you shouldn't have watched a 25-minute video on the birds. But like towards the end of the movie, we get past all the general bird attacks. What happens? Not the end, but what's happening in like the third act.
So Lydia, the mother, gets really worried about her daughter. The main character, Melanie, goes to the school to kind of check on her. And she's just sitting there, and she doesn't notice the birds starting to amass. She notices them, she gets a little freaked out, and she wants to take the kids out of there. But just like any typical horror movie, they're just doing things that seem like, why are you doing that? That's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Stay inside, don't run outside where these dangerous birds are. And so they do attacking the children, but they mostly get out of there safe. And they head into the diner, and she goes to call her dad, and nobody really knows what's going on. There's some rumors going on, and then the biggest, bird attack happens, where it's just in the street. They attack the guy pumping gas, and then
the gasoline slowly spreads its way through the town.
The guy accidentally lights himself on fire, and
blowing up the gas station in the process.
Just total mayhem. And so they want to go back to Mitch's house, or Lydia's house, however you want to look at it, the mother's house. And, and they start boarding up the window, and they're hunkering down, and you're thinking, why aren't you leaving town? Why do you want to be here? But they hunker down. And
let's talk about the technical aspects of the birds before we actually move on to any of the other stuff. Like, what did you think of the special effects, let's call them? Well, let's call them.
I'm not old enough to have seen the movie when it was released.
This is part, unfortunately.
But from what I understand, Hitchcock was very famous by this point. He must have had probably a large budget to do something like this.
Right. I mean, this is '63. Hitchcock had been famous throughout the '50s with his own TV show. On top of all that, most people don't get a TV show to make what they do in the movies in miniature form. So he was very popular by '63.
So, I think that by today's standards, it's pretty awkward, but there's still a lot of times where you can tell there's some sort of green screen, but yet it still works really well. There's a couple of scenes where you can really see some separation there, and it was really glaring, but most of it was very well done, and really hats off to those actors who probably had to try to fend off these invisible birds.
It's terrifying in a different way because there's actual birds on set. We would never get away with that nowadays. The Humane Society would drop right on top of that movie to take birds and literally throw them into the scene. But birds are everywhere in this movie. The bird handling part is going to be one of the greatest special effects. The ability to just have 100 birds sitting on the ground all at once and not doing much of anything. That's almost impossible. That required some special coaxing, which was whiskey, from what I heard.
I did not know that. Certainly CGI would have made that a little bit easier.
Yeah, but how about the sound effects while we're talking about it?
I thought that was probably one of the parts that really broke the immersion.
Yeah.
I think that, I can't really say to it, how was it in the 60s time frame? I assume it was great for what they could do.
Yeah.
But especially at the very end of the movie, when the birds are trying to break into the house, and the actors are kind of just mouthing things to each other, and there's these odd noises going on. it didn't really sound like
Yeah, I mean, I know
bird
that
attack noises.
they were working with early electronic organ stuff to make like bird noises. There's a reason why they kind of sound off, and I'm quite sure part of it was like, well, people had never heard stuff like this before. So like it was creepy and strange and sounded vaguely like birds.
It definitely was creepy.
But we work with sound mixing all the time nowadays. So like the idea of being like, oh, here's this like electronic organ making a bird noise, that would not, we wouldn't be like, oh, this is crazy, this is great, let's, you know, it just wouldn't occur to us.
Right.
Did you notice the backdrops? Like, let's go to the top of this hill, here's a painting, it's the background.
That was one of the most obvious ones, like when they were getting a drink for like the birthday party. Is that the one you're talking about? That one was really obvious. I think there was another one that was it around the school scene when they were running through the school?
I'm not sure. I didn't actually notice that one.
Maybe it was
pretty
maybe
sure.
it was just a green screen problem, but.
I mean, like, I didn't see it the first time. I had to actually spot it the second time, and even then, I was just because I was looking for new details, and was like noticing, oh, that sand goes straight to grass, so that doesn't quite add up. Mitch goes to the top of the vista and waves his hand as if it's like way off in the distance, like look at all this scenery, and he's literally a foot from the wall.
Yeah, that was the most noticeable one. If there was more, I didn't actually catch them during the.
Yeah, movies still holds together really well, mostly because of how suspenseful it is. So how does Hitchcock make this movie suspenseful? How does Hitchcock work with suspense?
Oh wow! There's so much there. I think one of the things that really struck out to me is the scene where the mother is going to visit the neighbor farmer who has chickens to figure out what his chicken problem is. You know, she just walks into his house and she sees the broken teacups, and so just the way that was paced out really had me on the edge of my seat. And when they show how she looks into the room, you know, from her like pointing at her, and then the first angle of the room, she walks in a little bit more, shows the next angle, and finally the dead body there. And I mean, it was definitely gruesome enough, eyes pecked out, but they showed that for just an absolute like flash, and it was all about her reaction,
right?
About how she handled that, about the character, less than the gory details.
And there was an understanding that something bad was coming, but what exactly it was, we weren't allowed to see until we saw it real quick in that one shot.
So there's a lot of scenes like that where they really get into how deep the characters are experiencing that suspense at the very you know, on that very end bird attack in the house where Melanie is just like squirming on the couch.
Yeah.
And she's just not going anywhere and just can't even keep herself still. It just really is really creating that tension.
This actually brings up another problem with how Hitchcock is treating his male actors and how he's treating his female actors and their relationship to each other. This is a very interesting movie because it's mostly female cast. So we have a lot of opportunities for females to talk back and forth to each other. It has nothing to do with talking about a man, which is like one of the big sticking points for movies for this era is like oftentimes you have to have two men and they're driving the action forward. But here you have conversations between Melanie and Mrs. Brenner. You have conversations between Melanie and Annie, and they're all intrinsic to the plot of these birds and like what Mrs. Brenner feels like when she loses Mitch. But like this also comes down to all of these women seem to be a reflection of Mitch, ultimately. What is Hitchcock telling us about Mitch through the other characters in this movie?
I hadn't considered it like that.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it, though, that almost everything in the movie really does revolve around Mitch and relationships with him, even though I would say that Melanie herself is the main character.
Like, is more of a question, does Melanie lack agency? I mean, does she, I hate to put it this way, does she need a man? Like, is this the way that this character is being treated?
I don't think so. In fact, I think that she's shown really independently.
Yeah.
Certainly, you know, she has feelings for Mitch there, but this was all done on her design independently. I mean, she went out there to deliver these birds partly as maybe as just a gag to get at Mitch, but she's happy to tell him off after that first dinner.
Yeah.
I think she was portrayed as an independent character up until the very end, where she was knocked unconscious by the bird attack and had to be rescued. But I don't think she's treated like a damsel in distress. She's actively, like at the kids' party on one of those early bird attacks, she's helping to rescue the children.
As we admit, it might not be the right choice, but she was making choices.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like bizarre things to do, but she's.
Oh my God, there's going to be a bird attack! Quick, everybody run outside and scream.
Well, that's not what I was talking about.
Right.
Yes.
Here, I got. This seems as good a time as any to pull out the negative review of this particular episode. So, first of all, it's hard to get a negative review. You were telling me beforehand you had a bunch of people that came down to your house, and they were completely bored.
So for Halloween,
right.
I invited some people over and let's watch a movie. Let's watch The Birds.
Right.
I mean, I was on the edge of my seat, even knowing the movie. This is so tense, but and nobody had actually seen the movie, which I thought was surprising. But I guess it's old enough.
Yeah, it's old enough.
And everybody thought that the movie was paced just too slowly. I guess not their cup of tea.
No, but like it seems like I get the impression that your party of people just wanted to be more of a party and wanted to watch a horror movie. But it seems that anybody who actually is spending the time to talk about The Birds tends, or like is willing to be patient with it, likes it. It's got a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and even the two negative reviews both came from the 1960s. One was Variety, and Variety is trash for its reviews in the 60s. It's just talking about the stars and like how they're responding, and Hitchcock is all cock and bull now. It's not a proper review. And the other one's Time Magazine. I unfortunately couldn't read that because it's behind a paywall. I was going to pay him $15 to read a Time Magazine review. So I had to go to IMDb for the negative review in this one. This one is titled, "Were Phones Really Ever That Big?" by Savage Mouse on IMDb. I'm paraphrasing sections of it, of course, because this is way too long. I'm fine with the fact that there's never an explanation offered for why the birds go nuts. That was okay. What I can't buy is how dang dumb every single character had to be about it. Hey, look, a flock of birds is going to attack us. What should we do? I don't know, let's go outside and run around. Come on. I mean, they're birds. Just swat them down and step on them. They've got hollow bones and weigh less than a pound. And when the main character thinks she hears birds in the house after everything that's just happened, goes off on her own to investigate and then finds a room that sounds like there's birds in it, so she manages to shut herself inside and then get attacked by birds. Frankly, she deserved to die. I will say one thing for the birds. It has the absolutely most gigantic phones I've ever seen on film. And they paid for the phones, so darn it, they were going to use them. This movie would have been shortened 35 to 40 minutes if you eliminated the pointless phone conversations. It would have been over an hour shorter if touch-tone phones had replaced rotary dish dials by then.
Wow, brutal.
They have a lot to say about the phones. But like, yeah, no, is it... Like we talked about the impracticality of like running around in the middle of all these birds, but like how spooky can something technically be when you could, in theory, just smash these birds out of the sky?
Well, I actually don't think that's practical. I mean, I think some of those attacks seemed, there was enough birds that I don't think you could just go around swatting them.
Yeah. I think part of it is the special effects problem of being like, for example, that major center point scene in the middle of the movie with the bird attacking in the town and the guy getting knocked over and the gasoline dumping down and then everything exploding on fire. Most of the damage seems to be human error in this movie. And I get the impression that they didn't have the technology to show anything but that. And that's part of the problem of like why these scenes don't end up as realistic, because there aren't actual birds coming down and doing the damage that they could possibly do, because we can't show that.
Right.
We can only show birds smashing through a scene, you know?
You know, that's true, but I think that the movie exists on the premise that people are making these wrong decisions. And a lot of, horror, suspense, thriller type movies are going to be based around that. And I think that's okay, because people in stressful situations aren't making good decisions often. Would the average person have made these decisions? Probably not.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's that crazy. I think that's what that puts the movie together.
We get to the end of the movie. Mitch is now looking to get his family out of the house. I don't know if you could you speak about that for a second?
So the end of the movie, they've survived, but when Melanie was knocked out, I mean, I think Mitch really feels like they were ready to hunker down for longer, but with Melanie injured, he just wants to get her some attention. So ultimately they just tiptoe through a sea of birds to the car and drive off.
The movie ends. How successful is that ending with you?
That's the weakest point of the movie.
You think it's the weakest point of the movie?
I think that I like it from a large perspective. I like that it doesn't offer the explanation as to why. It's just paranormal. It's just crazy. I think that I would have loved to have seen that maybe it expands out, that this is now starting to affect large areas. It's in San Francisco. It's all over the world. Maybe, who knows?
I don't know if you actually read it also, but Hitchcock had plans of. There was 3 different versions of the
I saw those
ending, and
endings.
one of them happens to be the idea of there's a shot of San Francisco as they're returning, and there were birds just coating the Golden Gate Bridge.
I think that would have really definitely solidified. Hey, it's not just, oh, this was in Bodega Bay and we were driving away and all is good.
I mean, see, here's the thing is that I understand why that ending would be satisfying. There is something very, it was Earth all along, shake my fists at the air sort of thing going on with an ending like that. But I really love how there's that total creepiness where we don't know what's going to happen, and then they get in the car and they drive away, and you're like, so what happens next? And the level of suspense never stops. There's no soundtrack in this movie. There's no credits at the end. It's just like, this was done by Paramount Pictures, and then you're out of the movie theater.
What happens? You don't know, and I think that does serve as a good ending.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. I mean, I think that the ending was the weakest point in the movie, but
I will say this much: I got done watching that movie, was still fazed by the end because just like, is this movie's over? It's so strange because it just kind of drops.
It just ends.
And then I went outside and I opened up the door, and I work midnight, so it was the morning. And bird calls were everywhere. Like, it does keep the suspense level outside the theater in a sense. But yeah, no. How did you feel about the relationship between Mitch and Mrs. Brenner, his mother?
I mean, it was definitely an awkward relationship.
Yeah.
I think I don't.
He calls her darling
all the time. Yes.
There's another word for that he uses. Something. It's dear. He calls her dear as well.
But he also refers to Melanie with strange terms like that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously like endearing terms, but there was also times where he used. Man, I wish I could recall the specific what they were.
Right.
But there was some that struck me as odd while watching it.
Like, what do you think her goals are? Because Hitchcock seems to want to spend a fair amount of time talking about it, but then he doesn't really make it a plot point. What is her character arc?
Oh, she wishes she was stronger.
Yeah.
I mean, she's just almost in despair with her life in general.
Yeah.
And with the loss of her husband. I think that's maybe there isn't a lot of depth there, but I think that's her character. And she didn't kind of have a transformation here. She just broke down further.
Yeah.
But at the very end, she's in the car with Melanie. There's a connection there. And I think that's actually kind of almost shows that maybe there's a turn.
Maybe
she's
she
going to
won't
accept.
be treated like Annie. I think there's something to be said about unfortunate how Annie gets killed off in this movie because she seems like she's full of energy herself. And you kind of want to see good things happen to Annie, but that's impossible. We're in suspense and horror. Somebody has to die, and they have to be an important character.
Yep.
And you get the impression, I would assume that, I don't know, I don't think they ever really covered it. Like, Mrs. Brenner didn't actually respond specifically to Annie's death to be more accepting of Melanie. I would think that would be how it plays out to some extent, but it's never really approached. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but it was great having you here, Tom. If you enjoyed this video, go to YouTube and hit subscribe on Popcorn Roulette's website. You search for Popcorn Roulette inside the web bar. You're going to have to scroll past a couple of videos, but we're there. You'll find us. So give us a like. All right. Thanks for coming on, Tom. Bye-bye.